This video is brought to you by Against the Flow of Mississippi. Against the Flow of Mississippi is a book about Jake Fayard, a Marine veteran who is unhappy with the political machine running the state of Mississippi. He decides to fight the corruption from the inside. Jake will face more challenges than he ever has and will stand up for what he thinks is right. His notoriously hot temper will push him to the edge of murder, along with his friend and brother Kobe Barhanovich. Together, they will fight the system and give the power back to the citizens of Mississippi. Against the Flow of Mississippi is now available on Amazon. A link to the book will be placed in the description below.
We will not be silent. We will not obey. We will not allow our government to destroy our humanity. We are the final American Revolution.
When is the right time to stand up for freedom? Could it be when you start to feel and be slaves to the banks that cause hyperinflation, who are masters of commerce, lies, and bad legislation? Oh, if you looked in the eyes of 1,000 young children through fences of razors, their innocence.
All right, y'all. So, this is a debate that happened between Matt Haley and Louis Elias in Long Beach on June 24, 2023. Both candidates are running for sheriff. I know neither of the candidates personally. I've spoken with Louis Elias. I think he's a good guy. That being said, I'm watching this completely unbiased, but I'm going to interject with my commentary that I think will be important to everybody. Y'all watch. All right, y'all. Before I get too deep into this, I want to give y'all a little bit of background on me so that you understand where I am coming from. I know recently I've spent a lot of time away from the coast. But I've been back now for a few years, for a couple years anyway. And I've been watching what's going on. While I was away, I picked up a new skill set. Certified Correctional Officer for the state of Florida, where I attained the rank of sergeant. I know sergeant doesn't sound like very much, but when you look at the rank structure of the Florida Department of Corrections, sergeants run the prison. We're the ones that are making decisions. We're the ones that are dealing with inmates. We're the ones that are directly responsible for officers and inmates in our care. We're the boots on the ground. We run it. Much like I would presume a sergeant in the Army is. I've never been in the Army, but I'm assuming it's probably pretty well the same. That being said, I know how to run a jail. I've dealt with everything from the guy with credit card fraud to the guy with driving under suspended license, all the way up to death row inmates. I've dealt with them in some form or fashion. When I came back to Mississippi shortly after, I found myself in the employ of the Stone County Regional Correctional Facility, which is where I got my county jail experience. In Florida, I was mainly dealing with felons, convicts. those that are going to do better than a year in jail for their offenses. I'm taking that experience and understanding what's going on with public safety in Harrison County, and I'm going to use my experiences to translate what the real situation is. Now, just full disclosure, well, watch the debate. I don't want to cloud anybody's judgment. I've made up my mind. I want y'all to make up your own mind, and I'm not trying to be biased in favor or against either candidate. Just watch the debate, listen to what is said, and make your own opinion, please.
And on the second introduction, Mr. Louis Elias.
Hey, buddy.
All right, double check your mics to make sure they're all working. Let me know when y'all are ready to go.
We're ready.
Okay. Mr. Haley, I've flipped a coin earlier, and the nod was for you. So you got 5 minutes to talk about your campaign and introduction.
All right, hang on just a second.
Take your time.
I'm sure through all of y'all's phone calls today, people calling y'all and saying, hey, it's a beautiful day. What would y'all like to do today? Most of y'all said, we don't want to go on the boat. We don't want to do anything like that. Let's go to a debate. That's exactly what I said too. Thanks, Hunter. I am Matt Haley, and I'm running for Harrison County Sheriff. And before I talk to you about myself, I think there are a few things that you need to know about my opponent. On my opponent's webpage, it says that he has a 25-plus year law enforcement career. Now, when we got out of the Sheriff's Department, I retired with 26 years. My opponent resigned because he did not have the 25 years it took to retire. It also says on his website that he developed the first K-9 unit in Long Beach, which is also false. Timmy Huguet, who is here in the audience tonight, was a K-9 officer before he was in Long Beach. So enough about that. True experience matters, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I started the sheriff's office in 1996.
You know, I don't like smear campaigns. He had to draw first blood. That's what this says to me. There's no other way around it. He had to draw first blood. Come out when you open a debate, don't open about your opponent. Open about who you are, what you're about, not what your opponent is not. That's not the purpose of a debate.
Sheriff's office in 1997 under Sheriff Joe Price as a correctional officer. I worked my way through the jail. From the jail, I went from the jail to the Transportation Division. From the Transportation Division, I went to USM Gulf Coast Academy, graduated there as a patrolman. While on patrol, I was a DUI officer, a field training officer, a canine officer, and a criminal interdiction officer. From there, I was promoted to a criminal investigator. From criminal investigations, I was transferred to the Narcotics Division. From the Narcotics Division, I was recruited by the ATF to be the first federal task force agent of Harrison County for ATF. I spent 2 years on the ATF task force. I came back to narcotics, was promoted to the rank of lieutenant, where I oversaw the narcotics unit, and I was also promoted to the commander of the Coastal Narcotics Enforcement Team. From there, I would be promoted to an administrative captain over 3 divisions, and that's where I would spend my last 5 years. The divisions were transportation, process, and canine, and I was also over the mental health writs. I decided to retire in January to run for sheriff. I worked under 4 sheriffs throughout my career in Harrison County, and 3 of those sheriffs have endorsed me. Now, I can't tell you how humbling that is for someone like myself. It says a lot about me, and I'm getting a little jumbled up here, but I wanted to say I feel like the reason that our current sheriff has been so successful is because he used what he learned from those prior sheriffs. And when he started this, he was not a politician. He was just a cop, just like me. I've spent 3/4 of my career on the streets, not behind a desk. Thank you.
Mr. Elias, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can y'all hear me? I want to first start by telling you all what I said to my opponent at the Dido Bazaar. In our day and time, mudslinging is not what our communities need. I have instructed every individual on our campaign to refrain from any negative mudslinging. I had a promise from my opponent that we would keep it clean. We looked each other in the eyes, we shook hands and hugged and made a promise to keep it clean. I told him firsthand that I'm disappointed that that has not happened. If you cannot control the narrative on your Facebook page, how are you going to control the image of a sheriff's office? Y'all understand that the power that lies in the office of the sheriff is not about one individual. It's about a community, its peace, its quality of life. I won't go on about that, but I will tell you this, and I'll answer the allegations that he has made. 25 plus years experience are as follows. If you all would like to write them down, Mr. Haley.
I don't need to. I already looked.
Our law enforcement experience in the state is kept by Mississippi Board on Law Enforcement Officer Standards and Training. Excuse me, I worked with them for the last 15 years maintaining records. My first law enforcement experience came through the community college. 2 years of law enforcement experience riding firsthand, learning the ropes, very similar to a field training officer program. Those took place from 1992 to 1994. In 1994, I was hired full-time by Long Beach Police Department. I was emancipated at the age of 19. Went on in patrol from 1994 to 1996, I took a job with the Mississippi Gaming Commission, stayed there 1 year, Gulfport PD from 96 to 98, where I was awarded Officer of the Year for apprehending 2 armed robbers, one at the Hancock Bank on Three Rivers and Dido Road, one at the Hampton Inn on Highway 49. I went back to Long Beach, and what Mr. Haley is referring to, I'm very transparent. Where wording is wrong, I will address that. The wording should have read that I developed the first K-9 division. Within law enforcement agencies, we have different divisions that have their own rank structure. Long Beach had not seen that. I developed it, wrote the policy for it, created the structure for it. It's still in place today. From 96 to 98 at Gulfport, Long Beach, 4 years, served as a patrol supervisor as well as a K-9 supervisor. Went back to Harrison County in 2008. I signed up for the reserves in 2005. In 2005, of course, you all know things kind of got turned upside down here. Our coast experienced Hurricane Katrina. My wife and I experienced our first child being airlifted out to Ochsner Medical Center, and thank God he's okay today, but rough little ride there. But I was actually on the reserve roster with Harrison County Sheriff's Office from 2005 to 2007. If any of this you can verify with the state. I went full-time at Harrison County again in 2008. I worked from patrol from 2008 to 2010. I competed for the sergeant's position at the training academy then. I was awarded that position. I worked at the training academy from 2010 to 2023. To break that down for you, that is 13 years of first-line law enforcement experience, patrol on the streets. That is 13 years of administrative experience, actually handling budgets, writing policy. If you add those two numbers up, that's 26. So to be accused of falsifying something like that, I don't understand. However, I stand ready to clarify at any time and back it up with documentation. The fact of the matter is that none of the conversation that has taken place thus far is going to solve the problems that we face today. One of us has to tackle those issues. One of us stands here not only willing to acknowledge the problems that are within our agency, but the problems that are outside of our agency that our agency may even be causing. And once those are identified, it doesn't matter whose fault it is. You have to have a plan to address them. I have that plan. I stand ready to serve you on day one. I want you to think about the words endorsement. You cannot discuss problems within an agency without stinging a current administration. If you're on their coattails, you certainly can't do it. I haven't been able to do it while I was at the agency. You had to sit quietly. I'm able to do it now. That brings a whole nother level of transparency to you. The taxpayers, those that are wanting safety, wanting a better quality of life. But know this, each sheriff that I have worked for has already endorsed me. I was promoted 3 times through a competitive process, not handed a promotion, but having to compete through oral interviews with some pretty critical people 3 times by Sheriff Brissolera. To the rank of captain, director of the training academy, then selected to serve on a board that consisted of 5 hand-picked individuals to serve on Sheriff Peterson's transition team. That had to be approved by the Board of Supervisors. That transition team, he depended on to guide the agency in the direction it needed to go from his swearing in forward. And not only did I serve on that transition team, but he promoted me once again to the highest rank in the agency, Major. My position was to oversee training and compliance for all of our employees, over 300 employees. as well as our training academy that molds the law enforcement officers that you see on the streets today. We've graduated hundreds of officers and given them the ability to go out and do their job, and I'm proud of them. I'm also proud that I was entrusted with that. I have a personnel file that backs up my performance. In 26 years, I've never been written up. All I have gotten is accolades. What you are seeing today is the product of a man that has firm beliefs in transparency and accountability in doing the right thing no matter what. If it takes losing the support or the endorsement of any sheriff, I will still do what's right. I will sleep at night. And I have a higher being to answer to. Thank you.
Okay. First off, personal note, anybody who works with the ATF, that ATF can go to hell. I mean, that's just my personal opinion. ATF needs to be abolished. But aside from that, I do understand that would be an achievement for somebody who is working on the street in law enforcement. I would understand that you need that relationship with a federal agency to do your job. Not going to deny that. So I guess that would be a point in Matt Haley's favor. Mental health. Later on in the debate, I'm going to address the mental health thing. Endorsements. Honestly, Brizzolera was a decent sheriff. Troy Peterson, the only thing Troy Peterson has done as far as I'm concerned is put his name on everything. A bail bondsman can't go into the jail without writing Sheriff T. Peterson on a bail bond. He's got his name on the badge, on the doors. I mean, honestly, the guy's on an ego trip. Personally, as far as Troy Peterson goes, and I understand both these candidates have to pay him some homage since he is the outgoing sheriff, in my opinion, not a moment too soon. I get that. But let's face it. Brizzolera's been out of office since 2016? George Payne has been out of office since what? 2008? Joe Price has been out of office since, I think, 2002. Maybe before that. I don't know. We're not looking backward. I love history. I am a historian. I think history is important, but we're not looking backward at what previous sheriffs endorsed. I could care less what Joe Price, George Payne, Melvin Brizzolera, or Troy Peterson, and if you want to go back further than that, Larkin Smith is dead. But, you know, Leroy Hobbs is dead. Eddie McDonald's dead. Nobody cares what previous sheriffs want or endorse because they're no longer there. Glad they got their stuff going, and this is for both candidates, not just one, for both. I don't care. And the general public doesn't either. We want to know what you're going to do now. We want to know what you're going to do the day you step up and you swear the oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the state of Mississippi and the laws. When you take your oath of office and you get that 6-pointed star, That's what we want to know. That being said, sorry, that stuff just annoys the crap out of me because it's like, whatever, you know. Matt Haley seems to have a lot of street experience. Not a bad thing. Not a bad thing. He was a CO. He's worked in drug interdiction. He's done this. He's done that. Not a bad thing. Not a bad thing at all. I'm cool with that. I like a man that's from the streets. Elias, on the other hand, has got a lot of admin. Unfortunately, the job of a sheriff is not to go kick in doors. Although I know some that would still go and kick doors down. Don't get me wrong. I know quite a few people in various jurisdictions that hold the rank of sheriff that would still love an occasional door kick to the right door. That's not your job anymore. Your job is to run the department and delegate the door kicking to somebody else. It's the truth. You know, granted, I have seen some lead from the front. I've had wardens that I have worked for in prison in Florida that I had a warden that was doing a mass search with me. I mean, yeah, it happens. I've had assistant wardens gas people that needed to be gassed before a cell extraction when we were dealing with an out-of-control inmate. Yes, it happens. But that's not your job anymore. You're not doing this anymore. Your job is administrative role. Now, I want to talk about the high road here. Elias is taking the high road and not jumping on this mudslinging, which is a good thing. I commend him for that. I also commend his admin. Both of these candidates so far up to this point, they seem both pretty well qualified in my opinion. Let's move on with the debate. Oh, and I'm going to say this real quick since Elias said that he's never been written up before. Buddy, you may not have. But a lot of people's been written up, including, I admit it. Let me explain the write-ups real quick to everybody. Before somebody, oh, you got written up. You know why some people get written up? Some people get written up because they are genuinely not cut out for the job. Turn your uniform in, turn your badge in. This ain't for you, Bubba. No shame in the game, no disrespect. It's just not for you. Some people get written up for doing their job, but they do it in a way that somebody may not like. Some people are corrupt, and they get written up for that. When talking about write-ups, you know, honestly, I'm going to say that from a street point of view, I wouldn't trust somebody who's never gotten written up. Because a brown noser's never been written up. And I'm not saying that's what Elias was. I'm just being honest. This is an honest, unbiased video. Everybody's been written up at some point, unless you've never done anything, or unless you've just been really lucky, or you're brown nose. Just my opinion. And I'm not saying any of that is the case with Elias. That's just been my personal experience. Granted, we're dealing with corrections, not the street, but I'm sure it goes for the street too. We've all had that stern talking to. We all have bad days. not excusing any criminal behavior committed by anybody in law enforcement. I'm just putting things into context. So anybody who tries to say, oh, I've never been written up, I kind of question why. Again, I'll admit, oh yeah, I definitely have. But I'm going to continue this.
All right, Mr. Elias, the first question is for you. As Harrison County is the second largest county in the state, how will you, as the sheriff, manage the size of the county jail, and will you bring back more work programs for misdemeanor offenses?
Our county jail is in crisis as we speak. I cannot find any time in history where our jail was more short on employees. Now, when you hear that spoken about, you're going to hear the answer that it's a nationwide problem. The current sheriff criticized the previous sheriff for being 12 employees down. Today we're 80 down. Now, what that means to us, you would think is not a whole lot, but it is, because there's some pretty dangerous folks in that jail. And not only is it dangerous for one of them to be able to get out, which we've seen historically, but if one of them get hurt, guess who pays for it? And I say if, they've already been hurt. We have lawsuits pending on inmates that have been beat and raped and taunted. The way those things have been fixed historically is through proper training. The problem that we're seeing is a snowball effect. You don't have enough employees to send those that need to go to training to the classes. So individuals that worked on my watch would set these classes up, all the material ready, no one there to teach. But I tell you, it's not a nationwide problem. We're certainly different than the rest of this nation in a lot of ways. But Hancock County is fully staffed, Stone County is fully staffed, Jackson County is fully staffed. They're no better than us. Pass Christian Police Department pays less for their patrolmen than our correction officers make, and they're fully staffed. That tells me one thing. We have to change the way we do business, and that starts with our management in the jail. It's that simple. Tell me the other part of your question.
The second
The
part
work
of the question
programs?
was, will you bring back more work programs for misdemeanor offenses?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a 145-bed misdemeanor facility sitting on Lorraine Cowan Road. Your taxpayers, each of your monies were dumped into that facility this sheriff's first term. Completely renovated, new showers, new cameras, new paint, new everything, and guess what? There's no one in it. It's designed for individuals that are vetted to come in, stay there, go out during the day, work, pay back their debt to society. We don't utilize it. I also commend our state legislators. House Bill number 586, if any of you all are familiar with that, that was a bill that was put into place that authorizes specific counties, including Harrison, to take advantage of a program that allows inmates to work while incarcerated. My question that I've not gotten an answer for is, why are we not taking advantage of that? It's a great program. I will take advantage of that. I will put people back into the work center, get them back to work for the community. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir. Mr. Haley, if you don't mind with the rebuttal.
Yeah. So I'm not sure where those numbers are coming from, but as of June 21st, Jackson County has a jail that houses 330 inmates. They're down 13 employees, 13 correctional officers. Hancock County has 350 inmates. They're down 14. Hinds County, they house 40 more inmates than what Harrison County houses, is down 104 correctional officers. We are down 65. We're not down 80 or 85. And as far as the work center goes, The repairs and the things that were done at the work center were done out of drug forfeiture funds. It wasn't done out of your tax dollars, just so we're clear on that. The problem is the officers and the recruitment. Recruitment is what we have to change. You can say that you're going to open the work center and you're going to do all of these things, but unless you have the bodies to do it, it's not going to happen. And we don't have the bodies to do it, or it would have already been done. The recruitment is what we have to change. And it's got to change day one. That's all.
Mr. Elias, if you want to rebut.
Sure, absolutely. Whether it's 65 or 80, it has been 80 just as recent as a couple of weeks ago. But whether it's 65 or 80, it's unacceptable. And I think my opponent just said it all in that we have to change the way we do business, which contradicts his statement of, if it's not broke, you don't fix it. Yeah. It is broken, being 65 employees down in the jail, having jailers asked to do a job that is very dangerous, that requires specific training to do, and not allowing that training to take place is unacceptable at very least.
Mr. Haley, you have the final rebut.
No.
Okay.
I am so glad that this has been mentioned. First off, in the state of Florida, and yes, I'm referring back to my days as a correctional officer sergeant in the state of Florida, because that's where I did most of my time. The state of Florida has community release centers, community work release centers. These are convicted felons, not misdemeanors, felons, who are actually allowed to go out, get a job. At Walmart, it is an incentivized program. These are community custody inmates. They're at the end of their sentence. Usually they have 18 months or less on their sentence. And it gives them something when they come out. The state takes most of their paycheck. They're allowed to have, I think, $20 in their possession at any given time. They're allowed to go straight to work and straight back to prison with no detours unless otherwise approved. This is a good program, and it works. And when an inmate is released from jail, they have a little bit of money because the state takes most of their money and puts it up for them. They pay their court fines, they pay whatever restitution they have, and at the end of their sentence, they get what's left. It's a great program. Granted, I'm talking about convicted felons who, some of them would have nothing. They would just be thrown to the wolves when they get out. So that's a good program, and it does work. The work release center being empty, I'm actually going to get on that later in the. I'm going to get on that later on, but I am going to address the training and recruitment. First off, training for correctional officers in the state of Mississippi is a joke. Joak, joke. But nobody's laughing. I'm certainly not. When I did my corrections training in the state of Florida, it was 3 months long. It was a 12-week. It was 470 hours. The state required 420. The Department of Corrections gave me 470 hours of training. Not counting the initial 120 hours of onboarding before I even really got cut loose on the compound. You're on the compound for about 3 months before you go to training, anywhere from 3 to 6 months. You have up to 6 months before you have to be enrolled in an academy. Otherwise, you will lose your job. So they would roll you into an academy, train you. And when you get out of the academy, of course, you have annual in-service training, and you have continuing training on top of that. You may go into work one day, and your captain will pull you up and say, hey, man, you're going to go learn, you're going to dart training. You're going to go learn cell extraction. You're going to go learn something else. That way, he had personnel that was on the compound trained to handle whatever was necessary. And then you had your other training that you could get into, K9. K9's a big thing in jail. You had RRT, which is Rapid Response Team. CERT. CNT. Crisis Negotiation Team. CERT is, I forget what the acronym actually stands for, but it's basically when the fecal matter hits the rapidly rotating blades, that's who you call. When RRT can't deal with it, CERT is like the Navy SEALs for the Department of Corrections. Okay? That's when it's really it's really went there. CNT, which is Crisis Negotiation Team. You have a hostage situation. You know, inmates take over the jail. Don't tell me it can't happen. Just because it's never happened in Harrison County doesn't mean it can't. The way I was working down in Florida, we had about 25 COs on the compound on night shift where I worked, and 1,800 head of convict. At Stone County, when I worked there were 6 of us COs, sometimes as little as 4, and we're outnumbered 100 to 1. When we were down 4, we were almost outnumbered 100 to 1. You can do the math on the 6. And we did our job, and we did it very well. Again, I have to commend everybody at the Stone County Regional Correctional Facility. I think that's an excellent department. I think Stone County is an excellent agency. I was proud to work there. Captain Eddie Rogers, brother, jam up. The 2 lieutenants that were there, jam up. My sergeant, who actually came from Harrison County and went to Stone County, and I believe she took a pay cut too, was one of the best I ever had. Why is Harrison County not having recruitment? Well, let's think about it. Who really wants, unless you just cut out for it, who really wants to work in a jail? Nobody. Unless you just been doing it so long that it's like, okay, well, I mean, hey, I'm used to it. Me, I am that guy. I am used to working in the jail. I am used to dealing with violent offenders. You know, somebody kicking on the door saying, hey, CO, let's run it. Hey, I'm good with that. But you get your average citizen, you give them 3 weeks of training. Once they get to training, which I believe is all Mississippi requires. I never went through an academy in Mississippi. I know they have one up in Columbia. I know Harrison County does one. But I believe it's only 3 weeks. What can I take somebody off the street? And Lewis, brother, I'm going to ask you this when I call you tomorrow because I know you gave me your number. Since you were over the training academy, I intend to ask you this question. What can I train an average citizen in 3 weeks when it comes to care, custody, and control of the inmate population? How can I teach PREA? How can I teach CPR? How can I teach firearms? How can I teach officer safety? How can I teach defensive tactics? How can I teach any of the, uses of force policy? How can I teach any of this stuff and cram it into a 3-week program when they couldn't even cram it all in Florida in 3 months. They barely did it. And I don't know if you have to take a state test in Mississippi to be a CO. I know in Florida you do. I have my certificate from Florida still. But the whole point is you need to understand what you're doing. Because if you get your average citizen off the street that thinks he's going to walk in there and be scared, he's in the wrong line of work. If he comes in there and he just thinks he's going to go and, get on a power trip because somebody gave him a uniform and not have the backside to back it up. I'm trying not to cuss in this video because I'm putting it in places that they wouldn't appreciate it. So that's why I'm trying to catch myself and watch my language here. But if they don't have the backside to back it up, they're going to get hurt. And let me tell you something, folks. If you've never faced down an inmate in a cell with a cup of bodily fluids, urine, feces, blood, and other bodily excrements, that cup is not going to land on the officer that started something with that inmate. It's going to land on the next officer that comes through. And they don't care. All they see is a uniform. Now you have an inmate that gets to go take the cocktail. I mean, you have an officer that has to go take the cocktail because God knows what diseases this inmate is carrying. Could be AIDS, could be hepatitis, could be HIV. It could be a number of very nasty things. And it's all because an untrained officer on a power trip came in there and stirred that inmate up for no reason and didn't have the backside to back it up. I'm not a hug-a-thug. I don't believe in coddling inmates. I don't do that. But let me tell you what else I'm not going to do. I'm not going to allow an inmate to hurt me or my fellow officers. And I'm going to demand that from my fellow officers. I am going to demand that my fellow officers go home from that jail in the exact same condition in which they came to work. And if that doesn't happen, I don't care if I'm a supervisor or if I'm a lowly CO, I have failed at my job. Period. Oh, recruitment. Let me get on that for a minute. Let me tell you how the recruiting at the Harrison County Jail was. In 2020, I came home for 3 months. I had to deal with something with my daughter. So I had to leave Florida, and I came here. Still actively employed with the Florida Department of Corrections. My certification, obviously by that right, still very valid. This was, I believe it was in February of 2020. I was going to stay in Mississippi instead of returning to Florida. At the time, I was actually working at Everglades Correctional Institution down in Miami. I was a sergeant down there. Being a sergeant down there, I am charged with officers under my command and inmates in my care. I am responsible for both. Working night shift, as I did. I like night shift. I'm a night owl. The only person higher than me on the compound was the captain. And there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There were 10 sergeants on the compound. And if there wasn't an actual sergeant filling a slot, there would be a CO that was placed as an acting sergeant. Under that was a captain on the compound. Sergeants are responsible for everything under our care. If an officer screws up, we're responsible. If a sergeant screws up, the captain is responsible. If an inmate screws up, we're all responsible. And we have a duty to react and do our jobs. Whatever the job says that we're supposed to do, we do it. Anyway, at this time I had 3 years in. I go to Harrison County. I put in my application. They like me. I do an interview. I want to say there was 2 lieutenants and a sergeant there at my interview. While I am doing my interview with Harrison County, they ask me a question. Have you ever been arrested? To which I reply, yes. And I also put it on my application. Were you housed in the Harrison County detention facility? Yes. For 13 hours. I was arrested. Keep in mind, at this time, I am 36 years old. No. 35 years old. My charge was when I was 18 for driving under a suspended license. The only reason I went to Harrison County was because being young, being foolish. When I got arrested, yeah, I'm not going to lie, Grandma come got me out. But she was at work. So I couldn't get a bail bondsman in time, and Biloxi can only hold you for so long. So Biloxi transported me to Harrison County Jail, where I sat until I bonded out. And when I bonded out, I went back home. I paid my fine. I have no active warrants or warrants. I'm good to go. So a 17-year-old at the time charge stopped me with my training, my experience, and my abilities from working in the Harrison County Jail. Y'all tell me where that makes sense. Make it make sense to me, please. Later on in this debate, Lewis is going to tell another story about somebody else who was denied a job as a CO at Harrison County.
The next question will be asked by my fellow reporter here, the student from the Pascagoula School District, Jacoby Johnson.
This is for Matt Haley. The size of the Harrison County Sheriff Department has become an issue for the public. What way would you as sheriff create better opportunities for law enforcement?
I'm sorry, repeat that. The size?
Yeah, the lack of the sheriff county.
The shortage of officers.
The shortage of officers?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, it goes back to what I said before. We're going to have to change our recruiting methods. I personally feel like that we have lost a generation of officers with the defunding the police and the officer shootings and those sort of things. And, you know, it's not fun to be the police anymore. And we've got to get back into these schools, into these colleges, and start not necessarily pushing people to be law enforcement, but pushing people towards that sort of career. You know, there was a time when I worked for the agency that we were using drug forfeited money to allow our employees to go back to college. And I think if we were able to go back to that, it would encourage some of these college students that are getting their criminal justice degree to maybe seek us out and come to work for us. You know, I don't know if that's the best answer, but at this point we have to start trying different things than what we're trying right now. we don't have a lot of there's not a lot of effort or not the amount of effort that it should be put into our recruitment or retention.
Mr. Elias?
Once again, if it's not broke, don't fix it. It is broken. We are recruiting in ways that are not productive. We are retaining in ways that are not productive. Specific examples. Are we taking questions now?
Not right now. No.
Okay, I was going to answer it. These are specific examples of what I'm speaking of. You have an application process with us that is online. From 2012 to 2023, that application process set broken, where if someone was interested in coming to work for us and they filled out the application online, it disappeared. I sat on an oral interview board where a man came in to apply to work in our jail, which is a tough job. He's already served in the military. He's in a pair of jeans, which both of us are in today. He's in a work shirt that's pressed, and he interviews very well. He's got grit, he's got structure, he's got discipline. He was disqualified because he wasn't in a suit. He's not applying for an executive position. When I say the way we do business is flawed, those are things that have to change from the get-go. And then once we are able to hire someone, if they experience problems and you see people leaving in masses, any smart businessman knows you do exit surveys. You have to identify those problems to address them. We don't do that. It is broken. But you start doing that day one. The employees that I've reached out to, one of which was with us for 15 years, never had any problems whatsoever. One of the nicest ladies you want to meet. She took a job with CSX. She said, I love my job, but no one cares. That's what we have to change. That brings morale up. It brings a day back where people want to go to work. And again, I tell you, it can be done. It can be done because Pastor Chan's doing it. There's other agencies that are doing it. They're not better than us. And these numbers of being 13 down in other jails, that's impressive at first glance, but it's nowhere near the ratio that we're down, number one. And number two, they're taking our inmates. If Pastor Chan arrests someone, they have to drive them to Stone County to incarcerate them. Y'all understand what this is doing to our community. You can walk into a business. Our cities don't have jails. They depend on us. That's part of the taxes that everyone that lives in Harrison County, whether in incorporated areas or unincorporated areas, they pay for this service. So now when you go into a business, you would think we're in some far left state. Go in and do $1,000 worth of damage, steal $1,000 worth of goods, shoplift. You don't go to jail. That's turned on a vacuum cleaner for criminals. Getting back to the basics is absolutely necessary.
Mr. Haley, rebuttal.
My opponent.
I am so glad he mentioned that. I have been screaming about this ever since I found out, which is about a year ago. I have been screaming about this. You have criminals on the street. We all know where the Shell station across from the Beau Rivage is. They have armed security now. This is not the corner store at Division in Maine. This is across in the Beau Rivage. This is where tourists are going to come and get their gas after leaving the casino or going to the casino to enjoy the Gulf Coast. It's right there off the I-110 loop. Right there next to the ballpark. Mary Mahoney's, one of the best restaurants on the coast for fine dining, is what, 2 blocks over? And we have a need to where they have armed security. The Waffle House next to the Beau Rivage has had armed security. Never in my life. I am a native Biloxian. Yeah, again, I spent time in Florida. But for the first 30 years of my life, I lived in West Biloxi. Right on Travia Avenue. And I'm telling you right now, never in my life have I ever seen what I am seeing now on this coast. And it angers me. It really angers me. We have criminals that can commit low-level misdemeanors just enough to where, yeah, they might get arrested. But bad boy, don't do it again. Here's your notice to appear. Or they'll get OR'd. OR'd means they're released on their own recognizance, which means there's no surety bond, there's no cash bond to secure their appearance in court. Now, the police department, Biloxi, Gulfport, D'Iberville, Long Beach, past Christiane, which is already shorthanded, by the way, every department is. And I'm going to go ahead and say that the statement made earlier about, well, it's a nationwide thing that, police are shorthanded. You're right. It is. But when the cops can't do their job, they get aggravated. They get discouraged. Why are they wasting their time trying to enforce the law and nobody cares? Nobody wants to do anything. Their best efforts are for naught. No good deed goes unpunished with the police department. This is a Gulf Coast thing. This is a nationwide thing. But we're not talking nationwide. I'm talking about Harrison County, Mississippi. When I worked at the Stone County Regional Correctional Facility, and let's just say Biloxi PD arrested somebody and brought them up there because they couldn't put them in Harrison County, there's reasons. There was a magic word they could say, and I'm not going to make it public here. But if they said this magic word, we got to get on the phone. We got to call Biloxi and say, come get them. We can't house them anymore. Where do they go then? They go to the funny farm for about 3 weeks and then they're cut loose. 3 days and cut loose. That's what we're faced with, y'all. And I know some people will be like, well, Anthony, you're supposed to be a libertarian. You're not supposed to be for just locking people up for petty misdemeanors. Let me tell you something. Some people, petty misdemeanors or not, they need to be in jail. Some people would argue that vagrancy, people don't need to be locked up for vagrancy. I would argue that they would. Because when you're sleeping on the street in a prominent area like downtown Biloxi, what message is that sending to people who are visiting the area? Man, this place is a crap hole. I don't want to come here. Man, I can't even go get gas without somebody, hey man, you got any change? Or trying to steal out, trying to rob me, trying to steal something from me. People going into stores, business owners don't want it. Yeah, I know we all pay taxes in Harrison County, but business owners pay taxes too. And they have a right to feel safe in their business. Troy Peterson has let us down collectively. Again, this goes back to his ego trip, and all he wanted to do was write his name everywhere. I have no love for Troy Peterson. None. But that's where we're at right now. And it comes down to two things. Number one, there's a lot of federal inmates in Harrison County Jail. taking up beds because you have to house them on the county side. Can't house them with state inmates. There's federal inmates in there to try to pad the pockets of the sheriff's department. If we had the room, I'd be all for it. But when we have to turn out local criminals because we're housing fed inmates and nobody's doing anything about the jail, and this is not just a sheriff issue, this is a board of supervisors issue too. Y'all are certainly complicit in this. We have a problem. MDOC doesn't have the room because of everything that happened about 3 years ago with all the riots in the prisons in Mississippi. So where does a lot of your convicted felons that need to be in prison, they need to be transported to Central Mississippi Correctional Facility for classification, where do they go? They stay at the county jail for a very extended amount of time until finally they have a bed for them. Again, that has nothing to do with the sheriff, but it is the truth. That falls on the legislature. In other words, these are elected officials that work for me, work for you, that are failing us. You have to fix the problems. I said this a year ago. I've been saying, when are we going to have a candidate that's going to come out here and talk about the real issues? I think we found one.
Rebuttal.
My opponent keeps saying if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I think he's misconstruing things. The sheriff's office is not without flaws. It's not. I mean, it has its share of issues. But I can tell you, out of the 4 sheriffs that I have worked for, it has gradually gotten better. And right now, the sheriff's office is running great. Now, I'm not saying that there's things that don't need to be addressed or fixed, because there is. There's absolutely issues that have to be fixed. And I plan to address those issues. The issues that my opponent is speaking of are the same issues that I will be dealing with also. The issues with the misdemeanors and people not getting arrested, that's a lot bigger picture than what you think it is. But he is correct. We take misdemeanor arrests at the jail, but we only have so many availabilities for those. We have X amount of officers and X amount of space, and the sheriff is not willing to sacrifice the safety of the officers that are there to put somebody else in a bed, and I wouldn't either.
Mr. Elias, final rebuttal.
Again, let's go back to statistics and not opinions. First, I hear that over the last 2 sheriffs, things have gradually gotten better. It has not gradually gotten better. We were 12 employees down in the jail at the end of Sheriff Bristolera's term, and if we use Mr. Haley's numbers, we're 65 employees down. That's not gradually getting better. That's landsliding to the worst. I don't understand how any interpretation could come about other than this. And the fact that we don't have the space is not fact. We have 145 beds sitting empty on Lorraine Cowan Road. And the reason that we don't have the employees is because the way we treat them, the way we do business. We change that. We're able to start taking people that commit crimes again and doing our job. But it has to change, and it has to be acknowledged as a problem, what it is.
Mr. Haley, since the Harrison County Board of Supervisors granted the sheriff beach patrol a few years ago, will it be your request to increase the size, and what plan of duty will the officers provide for beach services?
I think that's one of those things that we're going to have to play by ear. You know, as this community grows, and if we see a need for that to increase, then of course that's something that we're going to have to address then. But right now, the way Beach Patrol is going, I think it's doing well.
Sorry to follow up with this, but would you consider this with the Black Spring Break scenario in Biloxi? Would that be something all in that situation with what's going on in the Beach Patrol?
So normally in those type of events, we pull from every direction. So it definitely would not just be Beach Patrol. You know, we use all of our assets in those situations. And not just that, I mean, cruising the coast and different events that happen, you know, down on the beach.
Mr. Elias?
I don't know how many of y'all know this. I thought it was common knowledge, but the Sand Beach is under solely the jurisdiction of the Harrison County Sheriff's Department. Not Biloxi, Gulfport, Long Beach, or Pass Christian. Harrison County. Therefore, when you have those events, Black Spring Break, cruising the coast, scraping the coast, what was this last one they had? Squatting the coast. All these events we need more of a presence on the beach in law enforcement because that is where everybody is going. Everybody's going to the beach. Why he is taking a business as usual approach to this, I'll never understand.
Patrol has evolved from, give you all a little bit of insight. Years ago, we had a couple of two-door Chevy Blazers running the beach and four-wheelers during the day. I see one of the guys here that used to actually work that. Then we went to the side-by-side Polarises, and we took those away and went back to four-wheelers. And the reason that that was done, I was privy to those meetings, was for safety. Visibility, being able, a deputy being able to see where he's going so we don't accidentally run over someone. Just recently, we purchased Jeep Gladiators, and we jacked them up and put nice wheels and tires on them, and they're on the beach. So I don't know how we got past the safety part of that and why we needed to jack them up and put pretty wheels on them, but they're there, and I think that they're doing a great job. Our Beach Patrol does. We move individuals around. If they're school resource officers during the school time, when they're off, they're on the beach. So I think we're doing an adequate job. And as far as Black Spring Break goes, I can tell you that that's a whole nother topic, and we can discuss it whenever you're ready.
Okay. Mr. Haley, rebuttal?
No.
All right.
Mr. Elias, you have
Yes.
built your campaign off of safer schools. How would you create safer schools if you are elected sheriff?
Absolutely. So y'all, one thing that I've received a lot of criticism on is not putting out specific details on a plan. I'll tell you something that I learned when I went through the Secret Service school years ago. You don't give the bad guys everything. But I will tell you this. We go from reactive, which is what we're doing now. We wait for someone to call and say, there's a shooter at a school, and we're going to respond. My opponent offered up the idea of an attack team being put together to respond to these incidents. It's inadequate. It's already been proven, not by my opinion, but by statistics. In the last 30 years, there's not been one active shooter incident in our country that was resolved by attack team. What our model does is involves numerous law enforcement agencies and their resources, from the sheriff's office to all of our police departments to the state's Homeland Security to Keesler's threat mitigation to the FBI. We all work together to address this problem. Also, intelligence. You have to work to identify threats before they cause a problem. And that can be done. 2019 proved that for us. If y'all remember the school shooting in Florida. that individual that was going to do that shooting, statistics also show that in over 88% of these incidents, more than one person knows this is going to happen before it does. We know from our years in law enforcement that where information is, it can be shared. This was shared. It was shared to an individual from here in Gulfport that I know. He did the right thing. He passed that information on to the FBI. The FBI sent it to their field office in Miami. And because there's really no structure in place to deal with this information, it's sat on a desk long enough for children to lose their lives. That's what will change. And it's not something that was thought of overnight. This has been worked on since 2014 with schools from all over the coast. It also involves a training aspect where instead of just seeing law enforcement training to respond as one agency to an incident, it's all of the agencies, including your fire, your ambulance services, your public works, your cellular companies. Anyone that has been around any of these incidents or the claim of one of these incidents will tell you you lose the ability to communicate. That causes catastrophic failure. And y'all pay close attention. It's probably the first time you've heard this much detail, and you're going to hear it again. It's probably going to come from my opponent. Other reason that we just don't let stuff out. But you're starting to see the inside workings of this model. And it's ready to go day one. We're not playing anything by ear. There's too much at stake. Thank you.
Mr. Haley, your rebuttal.
So I've never said anything about putting a TAC team together. What I said was we would provide training above what is learned in the police academy for our officers that are on the street for when these incidents may or may not occur. You know, we've heard about this plan for saving the schools. I have for the last 10 or 12 months, but it's just been smoke and mirrors. There's never been no meat to this. You know, I've caught wind of it may be some sort of task force, and you know, if that's the case, the biggest problem with task force, because I've been part of several of them, is filling them. These agencies don't have the amount of people that just overflow and you can just stick them wherever. I mean, it sounds good, but that's not the case. Your resources belong in your district. There are 5 different school districts in Harrison County. 5 superintendents, 5 school boards, and 5 attorneys that all have to be on board for this, whatever this plan is. The sheriff's office responsibility they're responsible for the schools in their district. Now, would we help other schools out? Absolutely. But for us, we are responsible for our schools. I said that I would put canine units back in the schools, narcotics, and gun detection, or black powder, if you will, and enhancing the training of our officers, more than that in the academy, and implement a proactive task force that is already going. It would just be putting a body in that task force, and focus on reducing gun crimes and violence among juveniles. And I also said that I would create a cyber analyst position to monitor the social media of these young people in school.
One of the most overused terms in law enforcement is the term task force. You say task force, the average citizen starts to think Elliot Ness. It's not the case. Task force usually involves more than one jurisdiction. Well, if he's talking about a task force, but yet only protecting the schools outside the city limits in Harrison County, that doesn't involve D'Iberville, Biloxi, Gulfport, Pass Christian, and Long Beach. But a real task force would have people on the job from those jurisdictions. That's what a task force is. He's talking about putting somebody on the task force. Somebody includes, somebody implies to me one person. And as far as monitoring the social media of kids, that's not the job of the sheriff. That's not the job of any government official. That actually sounds like a First and Fourth Amendment violation, sir. I don't like that idea. I have a 16-year-old daughter. Monitoring her social media is my business.
Mr. Elias?
My goodness. The cyber analyst position. And maybe this comes from me being a part of our administration, privy to staff meetings, quite a bit longer than my opponent. I'm talking about 12 years, 12 years in the staff meeting room as opposed to 3. Last debate that we had, Mr. Haley mentioned that we would hire a community relations officer, which we already have, Lieutenant Robert Lincoln, and he said then, and he said it again now, that we would hire an analyst, an intelligence analyst, who we already have now. She does a great job. I don't even know how else to answer that. We already have that resource. The other parts of our plan have been well thought out. It's not just by me. I'm not a school security expert, but I don't have an ego that's so big that I won't reach out to them. When we were faced with schools across our county needing assessments done, I'll give you an example of what I tell our students at the academy. Law enforcement houses the largest egos known to man. And sometimes that gets in the way of productivity. Sometimes it gets in the way of protecting children. I find that unacceptable. Each of our school districts were asking for assessments to be done through their respective law enforcement agencies. I brought on board Keesler's threat mitigation team. Long Beach school districts took advantage of that. Those guys are school security experts. They're trained in war zones to do these assessments. But in Harrison County, they did not want that. Our administration said we're good enough to do it, but the only reason I don't think we're good enough, is, including myself, is that we're not trained in that. Our citizens, our children deserve better, and that's what we're doing. We're bringing experts in to help resolve a serious problem. Thank you.
Mr. Haley?
So Homeland Security is already doing these threat assessments. I spoke with them 2 weeks ago. And he's right. We have an analyst, and she is an intel analyst, and she works closely with narcotics and criminal investigations. This is completely different what I'm talking about doing. That's it.
Okay. The next question.
Hunter, do I have the opportunity to respond real quick?
Well, that was the second rebuttal.
Thank you.
Okay. The next question with Mr. Haley. How can the Sheriff's Department work with the hospitals, centers, and other agencies to make sure mental health patients avoid the county jail?
So our current sheriff will not house mental health patients unless he has a writ from the judge. And I think he's right by that. The county jail is not a place for a mental health patient. We don't have the ability to treat them, and it's one of those deals that that's the last straw. If we get a writ to take someone, it's because the mental health facility literally cannot control them. And I would continue that same practice. Being over the transportation division, I dealt with all of the mental health writs. So my people would go out and pick people up on these civil commitments. So we have a close relationship with all of the mental health facilities. and always have. Through that, I become part of a mental health board where we traveled to Kansas City to view a diversion center to bring back here to the coast. Now, a diversion center would be an in-between. You know, it's not quite a commitment facility, and it's not on the street. It's just an in-between to help people with if they can't get their medicine, or maybe they just need to be off the street for a little while, or they just need some help in some sort. Now the ball is rolling on that. We've already found a building. I don't know where they're at in that process right now, but I will continue to work with them to make that happen.
Just a quick follow-up with the lack of the size-wise of the Pine Belt Mental Health Center, other facilities in the hospitals. Is there some type of avenue for the sheriff department to use?
So right now, there is no single point of entry. And what I mean by single point of entry is if Joe Smith, the patrolman, picks somebody up that obviously has mental health problems, that person just goes to the closest hospital. The perfect answer is to have a single point entry. And right now, we just don't. It's something that they've been working on and talking about, but it hasn't come to fruition yet.
Mr. Elias?
Yes. So I agree with Mr. Haley that mental illness is not a crime, and a jail is no place for those that are suffering from mental illness. All it does is agitate things. What we've done from a training standpoint is train our officers to better help them identify those that are suffering from mental illness. Now, having the resources to deal with that individual has become problematic. It has been for years. The can's been kicked down the road, and the only answers lie in funding from federal and state levels, and it comes from a medical standpoint, not from a law enforcement standpoint. We can continue to train. That's what we should do to help identify individuals that are in crisis and offer them resources. But as far as us being able to handle the medical side of it, none of us are trained to do that. That's just not in our scope. So I think that as a community, as a law enforcement community, we come together in hopes that we can get legislation passed to fund what's needed. The trips that Mr. Haley's talking about that they went on, I think that is great, but again, we have to have the funding to do it. Money is always the problem.
Do you think that's a possibility that the sheriff's department needs to have training in that?
Oh, absolutely, and we're doing that training now. We actually have an individual that's a captain on patrol that we sent to training for crisis intervention. He came back certified as a trainer and holds classes at our training academy, has been for several years now, training others in our agency and surrounding agencies. Yes, sir.
So that I was going to add to that. We would like to see all of our officers, CIT trained. Before I left transportation, probably 85% of my guys were trained because they were the ones that were going out and picking these people up. So we would like to continue that. We'd like to see all of them trained in that, but our local legislatures have done a phenomenal job with funding as pertain to this diversion center. They've allotted a bunch of funds for that, and it's rolling. It's just not open yet.
Okay, mental health in jail. Boy, this is a big one. There's a lot of people, millions and millions of Americans that suffer some form of mental illness. The percentage of incarcerated people that suffer from mental illness is substantially higher than what's on the street. I would say that 7 in 10 of the inmates that I have dealt with in my career suffer some form of mental illness. either naturally or brought on by years and years of drug addiction. It's a sad reality, but it's the truth. You know, substance abuse accounts for being a causation of the mental illness. And I agree, mental illness is not a crime. That is not something you lock somebody up for. However, those who are mentally ill are prone to commit more crimes than a quote-unquote sane person. Look at your jails. It tells the story. That being said, while I agree that the criminal act should cause somebody to be placed in a correctional facility, a jail, whatever, merely being what the public would deem crazy is not. To give y'all an idea, I had a neighbor who ironically at one point was a city council member for Biloxi, who after Katrina something snapped in his mind. Either he was on drugs or he had a mental breakdown. This individual, and I'm not going to name his name, would stand in the middle of a bush in his backyard, stark naked, take his water hose and water his house. I also have witnessed this individual taking a belt and whipping his truck and telling it to get a job. Now, is that a criminal act? I mean, it could be indecent exposure. It could be disturbing the peace, disorderly conduct. Take your pick. But what it is the man was looking for help. When I lived in West Biloxi, at this address that I lived at, I didn't have the training that I do now. I didn't have the view of the world that I do today. And we all just like, yeah, well, he's just crazy. Now, recognizing those signs and reflecting on that, I realized that the man needed help. Though everything I just said could have been an arrestable offense where he would have done time in Harrison County Jail, is that really the best place for him? Absolutely not. I've dealt with mental illness in Stone County when I worked up there. A lot of the cases that Biloxi PD would bring to us, vagrants, public intox, petty shoplifting, things like that. These people were mentally ill. Most of them. I would say the majority of what Biloxi brought us had mental illness. The problem is the sheriff really has no control over this. This is a state legislature issue. Unfortunately, the state of Mississippi puts almost nothing into mental health. That's where that change needs to come from. This is where you call Jackson, you call your state legislatures, and you say, hey, look, this needs to change now. And that will also make the streets a little bit safer.
Mr. Elias, yes. What do you believe is the biggest threat to our communities?
It's a tough question because there's a lot of threats these days. I think that decisions that we make, not only in electing an individual for sheriff, but other positions that are influential on the direction that a community goes. When you go back and learn from communities that have experienced catastrophic failures, where trust has been broken between law enforcement, between government, and a community, you understand how important each of these positions are to our peace, to our quality of life. You will see that I take that seriously. transparency, accountability, regardless of the consequences. I stand strong when it comes to those issues.
Mr. Haley?
For me, you know, I've chased drug dealers and drugs 3/4 of my career, and I've seen what it's done to families and children and people all over this Gulf Coast. And I've been told from day one as just a rookie patrolman that almost all crimes have some form of drug nexus. So if you ask me what I think is the biggest problems that we face, it's the drugs in this community. And we've done a great job, you know, keeping the majority of it off the street, but I think we can do better.
Without a doubt, drugs are and have been a huge threat. But again, we have law enforcement in place and laws to enforce. The threat that goes beyond that is when that law enforcement loses the trust of a community. That becomes problematic. I commend those that are out fighting the war on drugs. I was asked by a 25-year addict, are we winning that war? Y'all know the answer to that. We're having a tough time, but I absolutely commend the efforts, and they will continue. We need to look for new and more creative ways to do so.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. This is going to be the last question before we go to live audience questions. Mr. Haley, your thoughts on the support you have received from your predecessor, Sheriff Troy Peterson, and how this can help your campaign?
Careers went in the same direction. And I guess I was about 15 years in, and he started to try to recruit me to come to narcotics because he knew I chased dope my whole career. It's what I lived for. And he knew what kind of narcotics agent that I would make. So I ended up doing that, and he showed me the ropes, and there another place that I kind of followed in his footsteps. And anybody that knows Troy, he's just a good dude. He really is. But he doesn't pull any punches. So for him to openly support me, it's huge. I mean, it's the most humbling thing for me. And it's not just him. It's, leaders like him, like Sheriff Brissolera, Major Randy Cook, who is an icon here on the coast, to support me. It's humbling. I mean, I can't really say anything other than that.
Mr. Elias?
Y'all ready for transparency? Anybody smell anything fishy at this point? So you're looking at a guy that's here that was very close to Troy. My family, my kids called him Uncle T-Roy. Never went on a vacation without each other, never were on the boat without each other. I had a lot of faith in him. He had a lot of faith in me. That all stopped in one day with one business decision that we disagreed on, that ironically my opponent was involved in as well. It turned out terrible. I'll leave it at that. And the result is that from that day forward, I did not have his support. But it's very hard for anyone to understand when you have two guys standing up here that work for the same agency, that had the same opportunities, one of which was promoted to the highest rank in the agency, and all of a sudden, without any documentation, a clean personnel file, one who doesn't have a quarter of the experience is a better candidate for sheriff.
A quarter.
Well, you said you have 4 years administrative experience,
that was
correct?
A good one. That was a good one.
Is it 4 years?
Yeah. I guess a quarter of administrative experience.
No, I'm speaking of administrative experience. I'm
Yes,
just asking.
yes,
You were
yeah.
promoted in 2019, correct?
That's correct.
So what month?
I don't.
So do you have 19, 20, 21, and 22. 4 years as opposed to 15. That is what I'm telling you, where transparency and accountability comes in to play. Yeah. All right. Y'all listen, let me tell you what I told my boys. And I'm telling y'all this just so you understand. It's very difficult to understand. But at the end of the day, this isn't about me or my opponent or a seated sheriff or a past sheriff or who's endorsing who. It's about our community. It's about the problems we face in an individual or individuals that have specific plans to address those problems. Keeping all that in mind, y'all have to understand, and I've experienced it firsthand just as recently as the Dido Bazaar. I had a guy come up to two of our supporters, one of which was one of my teenage sons, and taunted him, told him some things that were racial, discriminatory, and I didn't hear it until afterwards. A couple of people told me what happened. But this is what I say to that, and this is how I calm my son down. Children are watching us right now. They want to see how they should act should they decide to run for office. And also, there's a lot on the line. My strategy is this: run on my merit, run on my abilities, specific plans. We are 42 days out from an election, and I'm hoping that you're hearing that I have specific plans. Visit our webpage, our Facebook page, watch the videos. But 42 days out from an election, there has been nothing but criticism and mudslinging against me, and nothing to talk about the problems at hand. And I think that if we're going to do that, we do it all in one day, but we go ahead and move on and get on to our plans because the community is depending on us. We're applying for a job that serves the community. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, so all I'm hearing from Matt Haley so far in this exchange is business as usual. We don't want business as usual in Harrison County. Business as usual has failed us for the last 100 years or more. Again, I'm a student of history. Going back to the days of Las Quav, business as usual, business as usual, business as usual. Eddie McDonald did what Las Quav was doing. Leroy Hobbs did what Eddie McDonald was doing. The one that we had that actually went to break that mold was Larkin Smith. He didn't last too long, unfortunately. Joe Price. He was a good sheriff in his day. Then we have what we have now. Business as usual, business as usual, business as usual again. We need change in Harrison County, y'all. Harrison County is not what it was 10 years ago. It's not what it was 5 years ago. We have problems here. We need solid solutions. The mudslinging has got to stop. And I want to address something that Elias just said. This is a job application. Just like those hiring boards that he sat on in the past. We all, every one of us who are registered voters in Harrison County, Mississippi, are sitting on a hiring board. We have 2 men that are applying for the job here. We can only choose one. I hope we make the right choice.
Mr. Haley.
Are we at our closing, or what are we doing?
No, we're at the final question, but then I'm going to get a live audience questions afterwards. So, but you have the rebuttal.
What was the question again?
The question was, Mr. Haley, your thoughts on support of that you've received from the predecessor.
Yeah, he was rebutting that. No, I don't have anything to say. I will say this. Regardless of what my opponent says or what I say, when you run for office, and I don't care if it's for dog catcher or supervisor or whatever it is, you both deal with crap, and I'll just say it, from both sides. He's dealing with it, and I'm dealing with it. So it's not just one-sided, I can assure you. And we'll just leave it at that.
Final rebuttal.
Final rebuttal is this. Where it is one-sided is on our social media, for those that have seen it. You will not see that type of jargon on our social media because I tell them it's not productive. I told Matt this the other night at the bazaar. If you cannot control the narrative on your social media account, how in God's name are you going to control the narrative of a sheriff's office that determines whether we live in peace or we live in hell? It's not going to happen. It's just that simple. I don't know how else you elaborate on that any further. Just look at the 2 pages. You'll see the distinct difference. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm controlling mine and yours on my page. That's the difference.
Hey, everybody. Can you hear me? There we go. So I got chose to give the first question, and I'm going to give one that you both have an equal opportunity to answer, and then y'all can go from there. You both have 25 plus years of experience, you say, in law enforcement. And we all see that. We all know who you are. We both that. But we have to make a decision on which one of you is the most qualified and what separates you from each one of your opponents. I think that's a question we all would like to hear.
If you want to go ahead, Mr. Haley.
You know, I think anytime you're choosing someone for a position of this caliber, you can say what you want, but it needs to be somebody that's been there and done that and not gotten their experience from books and magazines or TV. You need to have been there and done that. And I have worked my way through this entire agency, and I've been there and done that in every division. Every division. And I think that's what sets us apart. I mean, it's black and white.
Go ahead.
Y'all, I'm going to go through a few of our divisions, and not for my own good, but for the individuals that serve in these divisions. Apparently, maybe I'm missing something. Our training academy. When my opponent says that he has served in every capacity that there is, he's never served at the training academy.
That's a lie.
At our training academy?
I taught at your training academy.
What
this
did you
was before
teach?
you got there. I taught canine and criminal interdiction.
Just as I will show you my state file, I would love to see your state instructor file because it's not there. Our reserve division, our records division, dispatch, aviation, mounted patrol, which was for some reason done away with, but I can assure you we'll bring it back. Mississippi Highway Patrol just brought theirs back to help with crowd control. Community relations, IT, our school resource officers, and our SWAT team. He was a school resource officer.
Yes.
They take a special certification to be able to be claimed to be a school resource
Well, this
officer.
was before we had school resource officers.
So there wasn't a school resource officer. That's what I'm saying. It's a different job now.
Yeah, I worked in the schools.
There's specific training that it takes to gain the title or earn the title of a school resource officer that the state mandates. The only reason I say this to you is, at the end of the day, there's discrepancies, and that's fine. We're applying for a job that is the CEO of a company that has a budget of over $31 million. I have proven through my experience that I can handle that side of it. On day one, there's no getting ready for it. I can handle it. Being director of the training academy, the entire budget I handled. It was handled with the work of the Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College, having them on board for accountability. In addition to that, this notion that my experience of law enforcement came out of a book or off of television is nonsense. 19 years old, emancipated, and out on the street. As a matter of fact, I think, Mr. McGill, you asked the question, were we on television when you had your terrible accident?
I don't recall you there.
Okay. Well, I'll bring you the other officer that was there. And I can assure you that the days that I was on the street and did not know if I was going to go home, sometimes fighting for my life, was not on television. As they said on Cops, what you're seeing is real. You don't earn a certificate to be a law enforcement officer on television. I went through our training academy. I just don't understand that part. However, I will tell you that on paper, taking opinion and emotion out of the equation, the years of experience as an administrator, as a businessman, and as a law enforcement officer, I'm by far your best choice, and I appreciate any consideration. Thank you.
In law enforcement, we have a saying, if it's not on paper, it didn't happen. While I was working in Florida, and I'm not sure what it's called in Mississippi, but in Florida we had ATMS. Don't ask me what the acronym means. But ATMS held a database of all of our certifications, be it corrections, be it law enforcement, be it whatever. And it was held by FDLE. If Matt Haley is claiming that he has training in a certain area, the state file that Louis Elias is talking about will have his training. Oppositionally, if Louis Elias is lying about any training that he has, it will also be reflected in this same file. Now, I don't know if it's public record in Mississippi like it was in Florida, and you can look mine up because it's public record. What I do know is that if somebody's lying, make it available. Make it public. If I was running, everything of mine would be public. That's as unbiased as I can get here.
Mr. Haley, you get a rebuttal of that if you want.
So just to clarify for the next debate, the budget is 27 million. It's not 31 million. Are we in our closing now?
No, I got
Okay.
one more.
No, I don't need to.
live audience
I don't need to
question.
debate that.
Does anybody that's not associated with either campaign want to ask a live audience question? Okay. Mr. Boyd?
Okay, the sheriff's department budget is either 27 or 31 million dollars currently, but we're running, as we said, 65 officers down, for example. Does that mean we have a surplus in the budget currently because we're not paying those people? And if your budget on day one is 27 million, are you budgeting to fill those roles immediately or with who you have at the moment?
So, you want me to go?
Oh, go ahead.
So each person that works there has a pen, and those pens still exist even if there's nobody that's filling those pens. Right now, what we're currently doing is, or last I heard, people are working overtime, and they're paid from those monies.
Mr. Elias?
To answer your question, we turned in a surplus last year. Yes, where'd you go? Yes, sir, we did. And the frustrating part of that for me is that we have officers on the streets that need equipment that money could have been reallocated for. I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 million. Reserve officers that are having to buy their own weapons. They're not able to get jackets when it's cold. Those are things that we could redirect those monies, and while we're regrouping, determining how to fill those positions, instead of just turning it back into the general fund, put it to good use.
Okay, with that, now I'm going to give you guys as long as you want for the closing. I flipped the coin again. Mr. Elias, you're the first for the closing. You have as much time as you want because I've got the building for another 40 minutes. So.
Did y'all bring supper with you? I'll keep it brief. You know, we've talked about a lot. Y'all see emotions are high. I think that it's a very important decision to make. What I base that on is what I said earlier. When you look around this country and you see the failures that have occurred, we can't allow that to happen here. The equations that have caused those failures to occur, the factors in those equations have slowly creeped up on us. Now is the time to resolve them, not to point the finger of blame, but simply come to the table with solutions and solve them. You've heard me speak before, prioritization in spending. We have the money to do so much. We have the money to address our top priorities before we address frivolous things. There's things sometimes that just make my head spin. I don't understand it. And it's not just with our agency. This happens across the country. But again, we're better than that. When you wake up tomorrow, or when the next school year starts and your kids go to school and you don't see an SRO in the school, and you hear, well, we don't have the money for it, but you go by our work center and you see a hot rod sitting there. It's an antique car that they're building. It's got a Corvette motor going in it. They've spent over $50,000 on this thing so far. How is that going to address our problems? It doesn't. Those are the things that I'm talking about changing when we change the way we do business. I won't go on and deliver criticism after criticism, but you understand the point that I'm getting to. It's responsible spending. It's being responsible to those that we serve. Second Amendment, you won't find a stronger supporter of the Second Amendment than the man that's speaking right now. It's that simple. I will protect each individual's rights at all cost. No exceptions. At the end of the day, I will be accountable. I will be transparent, and I will represent you well. I stand ready to do that day one. If tomorrow we had a catastrophic failure and every national news media shows up here, every outlet shows up ready to cause chaos here on the coast, you're going to have someone at that microphone that will prevent it, that will deliver a message and represent you well. I humbly ask for your support. I thank you all for coming today. Y'all remember what I said about if emotions get high, keep it in check, find a place to handle it at 98.6, as my dad used to teach me, because children are watching and our community, our quality of life depends on it. If a sheriff acts like that, it's going to be no good from there. Thank you all again very much.
Mr. Haley?
One thing I would agree with is in what I've learned in this race is emotions do get high. You know, the people that are supporting me, they want me to win, and the people that are supporting Lewis, they want him to win. And feelings and emotions get involved, and I think that's just part of it. You know, I've never involved myself in really in anything political. This is my first go at it, and it's been interesting to say the least. I do want to thank Hunter Dawkins and Super Talk Radio and you wonderful people for taking your time out of this glorious Saturday, because I'm sure you couldn't have went out on the boat or done something fun. You chose to come here, which I think is wonderful. I will say that I firmly believe that I am the best candidate for this position. I'm the only one that has dedicated his entire career to the Harrison County Sheriff's Office with no break in service. I've had no break in my law enforcement service from the beginning to the end. I've worked closely with law enforcement agencies across this coast for over 3/4 of my career, from the streets and not from a desk. I know the ins and outs of the agency. I'm familiar with its operations, its policies, and the challenges that we face. I've got hands-on experience and the ability to handle diverse situations, make informed decisions in high-pressure environments, and I've got the respect of my colleagues. With my experience and my background, dedication, and commitment to the Harrison County Sheriff's Office, I'm eager to put that to use as your sheriff. And I firmly ask for your support August 8th.
Thank you, gentlemen. I
Thank you,
appreciate
Hunter.
y'all both being here and for giving us the opportunity. And thank y'all again. Gazebo Gazette, we thank you all.
Okay. I'm just going to say it. Matt Haley made himself really hard for me to like. Don't know the man. He could be a great guy for all I know. Probably is. But his business as usual approach to what's going on with the sheriff's department, I have a problem with. Because business as usual has failed miserably. Lewis Elias had some very good points, very solid points. And sounds like the man's got a plan to fix it. That's what I took away from it. And he also understands the problems with the jail, which in turn translates to a public safety issue. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Thank y'all for watching.